Hello, welcome to the Wire Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things sports. I'm Ryan McCrary, and to kick things off on today's episode, I'm going to talk about Indiana beating Miami to win its first national championship. Huge moment for Indiana's program. After that, I want to talk about the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, specifically focusing on the Broncos versus Bills game and the Rams versus Bears game. Those two matchups were absolutely incredible, had some fantastic finishes in overtime. And then lastly, I want to talk about CJ Stroud's struggles in the playoffs this year. He did not play very well in the postseason this year, and I want to talk about what he struggled with and why his underwhelming play caused the Texans to fall short in the playoffs, and how we should think about him as a player moving forward. That's what we have on tap for today's episode. I'm excited. I hope you are as well. Let's go ahead and dive right in. All right, let's kick things off by talking about the 2026 National Championship between Indiana and Miami. Huge game, and this game lived up to the hype. I was worried that this may be a blowout based on the way that Indiana had been playing the rest of the playoffs. They had been dominating. They dominated Alabama. They dominated Oregon. And I was worried for Miami. I'm going to be honest. I was worried. But Miami came to play. This ended up being a close game, but Indiana did come out on top, winning 27-21 to take home its first national championship. First off, before I get, into the weeds here with this game and dive in too deep, I just want to say shout out to Indiana. Shout out to Curt Cignetti. Shout out to that whole roster. This is a huge moment for Indiana's program. It's their first natty. It is the end of one of the craziest stories in sports history. The turnaround that Indiana had the last 2 years is absolutely insane. I don't know if people realize how bad Indiana was just a few years ago. They were historically one of the worst Power 5/Power 4 programs in college football history. And they were awful. And I feel like that gets forgotten about now when people watch how good Indiana was last year and then this year. Dude, not long ago, they were really in the dumps. And now they're on top of college football. And to have that kind of turnaround in just 2 years is incredible. And even just last year, Indiana was really good. They made the playoff, and they won double-digit games. So in just 1 year, they went from being a bottom feeder in college football to being a playoff team. That's impressive on its own. But then just a year later, they go undefeated, they go 16-0, and they win the national championship while being statistically the best team in the nation and doing it without having a lot of blue chip recruits. They don't have a lot of 5-star or 4-star players on the roster. In fact, if I remember correctly, they don't have a single 5-star on the roster. And that's incredible. That kind of dominance without the talent on paper. And I'm using talent. I know that recruiting rankings don't matter that much once you get to college football. I understand that. But, we're all college football fans. You get it. When a team doesn't have a lot of, 4 or 5-star players, yet are still able to perform at an elite level, that is impressive. And that's not how things are meant to be. Indiana is going against the status quo. And it's incredible. What Curt Cignetti did, last year and this year puts him in the conversation for being the best coach in college football. And I honestly think he is the best coach in college football. I think that based on what he did the last 2 years and turning Indiana around so quickly and making them not only the best team in the nation, but a national champion is so impressive based on where Indiana was as a program before he got there, that he has earned that title. And that's not a slight to everyone else. Kirby Smart's an amazing coach. Ryan Day's a great coach. There are other, really good coaches out there. Marcus Freeman, Dan Lanning. But man, this is unheard of. This is like when you rebuild a team on NCAA football and you take one of the worst teams in the game and turn them into a national champion like pretty quickly. Like this kind of thing only happens in video games. And now we're seeing something that only happens in video games happen in real life. It's really shocking. Now, I really want to get deep into this game here because this was a phenomenal national championship. And honestly, my takeaway from this game is, I think, different than a lot of people's. And when it comes to who I thought played better in this game. Now, I do want to talk about Indiana because they won the game. They were fantastic in big moments in this game. It was insane how often Indiana came through in big moments. For example, they blocked a punt at one point and returned it for a touchdown, which was huge. If I remember correctly, that put them up 10 points. I think that score put them up 17-7. If I remember correctly, I could be off there, but that was a huge play. They went 2 for 2 on fourth downs, I believe. They went for it on fourth down twice late in the game. Got it both times. And I think on one of those, they scored the touchdown. That's when Fernando Mendoza had that crazy touchdown run near the goal line. And then they had some multiple back shoulder throws in key spots where the receivers executed at a high level. Indiana was just amazing in these big moments. And this game ended up being one in which your margin of error was extremely slim. And so the fact that Indiana was coming through in all these big moments gave the Hoosiers a huge advantage. That was very important for Indiana to win this game. Getting that blocked punt, that big run from Mendoza for a touchdown in the fourth quarter, the back shoulder throws he was making, those plays were crucial for Indiana. And then on top of that, they forced a missed field goal. Miami missed a field goal at one point. That was also big for Indiana. That kept Miami from scoring and gave the ball back to Indiana. Indiana also had 0 turnovers in this game. The Hoosiers protected the football. They were very good on special teams. That was a big advantage for them in this game because Miami had some special teams struggles. And honestly, I don't think Indiana played that well, if I'm being real. They didn't protect Fernando Mendoza as well as they probably should have. They didn't run the ball as well as they had been running the ball the rest of the playoff. And then they weren't really that great throwing the ball. They weren't super efficient throwing the ball. Their advanced numbers in this game were below average. Which is crazy to think about considering they won 27-21 and beat a very good Miami team. Now, I want to give a huge shout out to Miami because I thought they played amazing in this game, outside of some mishaps. And I don't want to downplay the mishaps. They matter. But they were really consistent in this football game. And I think that's being overlooked. I tweeted out a picture of both teams' advanced stats from a website called GameOnPaper.com. I tweeted it during the national championship. And I tweeted it, I believe, in the middle of the game. And I tweeted it to show that Miami, statistically, was better than Indiana in this football game. Their run game was spectacular. They averaged 5.2 yards per carry and 0.27 EPA per rush. That EPA per rush ranks in the 87th percentile. Like, they were running at will. Now, they threw the ball a lot more than they ran the ball, which, honestly, probably a mistake. They probably should have relied on the run game more often because Fletcher was amazing in this game. And on top of, being able to run the ball at will, Miami had a lot of explosive plays, an explosive play rate of 11%, which is 79th percentile. They also had a 67% red zone success rate, meaning they scored a touchdown in the red zone 67% of the time, which is very, very good. That mark ranks in the 90th percentile. That's elite. Now, the issue for Miami, where they lost the game, is those big moments that I talked about earlier. Those big moments where Indiana came through, Miami struggled. And I mentioned that in a game like this, your margin of error is very slim. And that proved true for Miami. And that was a problem for them. They had that punt that was blocked in return for a touchdown for Indiana. They missed a field goal. They had an interception on the final drive when they were trying to take the lead. And that's what ended up losing Miami this game. You know, they weren't good enough throwing the ball in this contest. And I think they went away from the run game a bit too much here. And I think they should have, pounded the rock a bit more because they were having so much success there. I mean, they were averaging, their EPA per rush was significantly better than their EPA per dropback. So I'm not really sure why Miami wasn't utilizing the run game more. They should have been. And Miami's defense was amazing. Indiana on offense has been like a well-oiled machine the entire playoff. They were running the ball at will. They didn't really have to rely on Fernando Mendoza that often. And when they did, Mendoza was amazing. Indiana's passing efficiency this playoff was phenomenal until they played Miami. Miami's defense was fantastic in this game. Outside of that, if you take off that punt return touchdown, Indiana's offense scores just 20 points in this game, which, if you tell Miami, hey, you're going to hold Indiana to 20 points, they're probably thinking, okay, we have a real shot to win this football game. Not that 20 points is horrible or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, holding a high-powered offense to just 20 points is big. That gives you a chance to win the game. And I think Miami's pass rush was phenomenal in this game. They put a ton of pressure on Mendoza. That was impressive. Miami just couldn't execute in big moments, and it killed the Hurricanes. It killed them. One more thing I want to talk about before I move on and talk about the future of Indiana football. I do want to talk about the decision from Curt Cignetti to kick a field goal at the end of this game when it was 24-21. He kicked a field goal to go up 5 points, and he was electing to give Miami the football back and force them to score a touchdown. And he did this despite being really aggressive on fourth downs in the fourth quarter. He had gone for it twice in the fourth quarter on fourth downs and converted twice. But in this moment, he decided to kick a field goal. I get why he did it. I understand it. Honestly, I think it would have been a very good decision to go for it because they were up 3 points. The way that your opponent is going to play the next drive changes depending on if they're down 3 or if they're down more than 3. Because if they're down 3, they are more likely to be conservative and just play for a field goal. And then in overtime, it's basically like a coin flip on if you're going to win. But if you go up by 4 points or more, then Miami has to try to score a touchdown. They're going to be forced to play aggressive. And that makes it more likely that you're going to lose. Because if you aren't up by 4 points, if you're in Indiana shoes, then your opponent, Miami, is more likely going to play for the tie. And so, it actually is to your disadvantage to go up 4 points because you're most likely not going to lose the game if you're up 3. Because of the way that teams usually handles these last-minute drives when they're down 3. In these situations, teams typically just play it very conservatively and play for the tie. So I thought it was interesting that Curt Cignetti did not go for it on that fourth down at the end of the fourth quarter. If he goes for it and Indiana converts, they likely end the game right then and there. So I thought that was a play that wasn't, I don't want to say it was like a huge mistake, but it was a moment where Indiana could have secured the victory by being really aggressive, and they decided to be conservative, and that was a bit disappointing. But man, What a freaking game. What a run for Miami. Like, I was arguing that Miami shouldn't have been in the playoff, not based on the quality of their team, but based on the quality of their resume. And they went into the playoff, and they performed so well. They beat A&M, which I thought would happen, but then they upset Ohio State, which I did not expect whatsoever. Then they took down Ole Miss and gave Indiana the best fight they got all playoff. Miami, hey, I give you a round of applause. Y'all played so freaking well. And honestly, the Hurricanes deserve to win this game. They played well enough. They just needed to execute better in those big moments. So what does this mean for the future of Indiana football? What does the Hoosiers' future look like? They're going to lose Fernando Mendoza to the NFL draft. They don't have a ton of five-star talent on this roster. Their roster is a bit older. Are they going to be able to keep this up? I think yes. Based on what Indiana's done in the transfer portal so far, based on what we've seen from Coach Curt Cignetti, I think they're going to be fine. I don't know if they're going to go back-to-back. Winning back-to-back is hard. That is tough. Ask Ohio State. Like, it is really tough to win back-to-back. So I'm not going to predict that, but Indiana's going to be competitive for a long time, I think. And I think Curt Cignetti is good enough to get this team back to the promised land. We'll see if it happens. But man, I'm going to be telling my future children, my future grandchildren about this team. What a special season for Indiana. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that Indiana would make such a quick turnaround and have such a dominant season? Man, what a special team. I've heard a lot of people talking about whether or not Indiana would beat the other all-time great teams like 2019 LSU, 2001 Miami, 2020 Alabama. I think it was 2022 and 2023 Georgia. I think those are the teams that went back-to-back. Would they beat them? I don't know. Maybe not. Those teams were really, really talented, especially in 2019 LSU. But I do feel confident that Indiana would give them a fight, and that they do have what it takes to beat those all-time great teams. This Indiana team was special. I hope we don't, take this for granted. What a special season for college football. All right, let's move on. Talk about the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. We're specifically going to talk about the Broncos-Bills game and the Rams-Bears game. Let's start off with Broncos-Bills. The Broncos beat the Bills 33-30 at home. Big win for Denver. They are now heading to the AFC Championship game. This was a really weird game for the Bills. Josh Allen, man, he struggled. He did not play very well. Some of his advanced numbers were fine, but if you watch the game, he had a lot of bad plays. He had 2 interceptions, 2 lost fumbles. He had a comical fumble right before halftime. That was crazy. He was running with the ball and holding the ball out in one hand and almost threw the ball backwards when he got hit. It was insane. It ended up allowing the Broncos to kick a field goal as time expired. That was crazy. But he did have some nice moments. He had a lot of big-time throws in this game. Had a big-time throw rate of 7.7%, which is really good. He also did a great job of avoiding pressure, limiting sacks, and his intermediate passing was actually pretty good in this game. And overall, he was quite efficient in terms of EPA per play, which is, you like to see that. Now, the Bills offense had a mixed bag trying to throw the ball. They had some very low lows, of course, but also they had some nice moments. Now, they were very successful running the ball. The Bills had 183 rushing yards in this game and a rushing success rate of 53%. And they had a nice comeback in this game. At one point, the Bills were down 23-10, and it looked like the Broncos were going to just run away with the game. But the Bills never stopped fighting. Their defense locked in. They held the Broncos offense at bay for a little bit, and they were able to force overtime. And the Bills probably should have won this game, as they had a higher success rate overall than the Broncos. But the Broncos, although they took a punch from the Bills in the second half, they put together a nice fight. They came back, made some big plays in the end, and were able to win this game. The Broncos, their defense was really, really solid in this game, especially against the pass. They forced a handful of turnovers, and they generated 27 pressures, which is very, very impressive. And Bo Nix, although he wasn't great, he did some nice things in this game. He had 4 big-time throws to 2 turnover-worthy plays, and he didn't take a single sack. He also had a really great day as a deep ball thrower. Now, of course, I cannot talk about this game without talking about the controversial calls at the end of overtime. There were 3 big calls in this game. First, an interception on a deep ball to Brandon Cooks that would have likely won the game for the Bills. And this was a crazy play where Brandon Cooks caught the ball, and it was questionable on whether or not he had full control of the ball. He goes to the ground, his knee touches, the defender is touching him. But then once he hits the ground, the ball is then ripped away by the defender. And it's called an interception on the field, I believe. And after review, the call stood. It was ruled an interception. I thought, and apparently based on the rule book, it seems like the call may have been correct. But man, I find it hard to believe that this shouldn't be ruled a catch. Because Brandon Cooks caught the ball, went to the ground, his knee touched, and the defender touched him. Should that not be a dead play at that moment? I know that the receiver has to, survive the ground. I understand that. I get it. And for that reason, I understand why the call was made. After having some time to think about it, I understand the call, but man, what a brutal play for the Bills. And why isn't the receiver down by contact in that moment if they have full control of the ball at the moment in which, their knee is hitting the ground and the defender touches them? And of course, there were also 2 big pass interference penalties called on the Bills in this game. There was I forget who the first one was thrown on and which receiver was being targeted, but that one was freaking horrible. Like that was a ridiculous call on that one. That allowed the Broncos to gain a ton of yardage on one play. Then right after that, Bo Nix threw a moon ball to a receiver deep down the field. It was underthrown, and of course, Tre'Davious White makes contact with the receiver because the ball is underthrown, and he gets called for PI. And it was PI. It was PI because the ball was underthrown, but it was still PI. Now, Tre'Davious White crashed out on a ref. It was crazy. He took his helmet off, spiked it to the ground. It was insane. I loved it. I thought it was valid. His call was correct. He deserved that PI penalty, but good Lord, the refs were like taking over the game in overtime, so I actually understood it. What I didn't understand was how calm Sean McDermott was in this game. Dude, he was like not reacting at all as the refs like stripped this game away from the Bills. It was insane. He was chilling on the sideline, didn't look mad. I'm like, dude, you should be ripping the refs a new one right now. What are you doing, dude? What are you doing? That was crazy. After the interception on that knee ball to Cooks and 2 pass interference penalties, the Broncos kicked a field goal and won the game. And then somehow, this is the craziest news of all time, Bo Nix fractured his ankle on one of the last plays of the game. No one saw it. No one even had a sliver of a clue that he was hurt. Yet apparently he fractured his ankle, and it was that was announced after the game. I remember sitting next to some friends watching the game, and they're like, "Yo, it just got announced that Bo Nix is out for the season." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, he didn't get hurt." And they're like, "Yeah, he fractured his ankle." I was like, "What are you talking about? When? Like, what? When did that happen?" And apparently it happened on like one of the last two plays before the Broncos kicked a field goal. So now we're going to get Jarrett Stidham leading the Broncos in the AFC Championship game. I didn't realize the Broncos had so many Auburn Tigers at quarterback. It's crazy. But yeah, that'll be really interesting to see how Jarrett Stidham plays in the AFC Championship game. I mean, hardly playing all year. I don't even know if he's taken a snap all year. And now being thrown into the AFC Championship, that is absolutely freaking nuts. Like, that's going to be high pressure. Hopefully he handles it well. I don't envy him. That's a tough position to be in. We'll see how he plays. Some other big news that happened after this contest is the Bills deciding to fire Sean McDermott, which I saw a lot of people being surprised by that. They were like, "What?" Like Dan Orlovsky was on Get Up, like he was like, "What?" It was crazy. I'm like, dude, what are we talking about? He could have been fired like a year ago, and it would have been like understandable. I feel like, but it sounds like Sean McDermott maybe is liked by a lot of people. I just think after years and years and years of not making the Super Bowl with an all-time great talent like Josh Allen, that him getting fired was not the most surprising thing in the world. Now, I don't really understand why McDermott gets fired, but the GM, Brandon Beane, I think that's his name, I don't understand why he's not getting canned, because he put together the roster. He's a big reason why the Bills were rolling out Brandon Cooks in the year 2026. That's why Brandon Cooks was getting big time targets in overtime of a playoff game in 2026, which is crazy to think about. And there was a report that apparently Sean McDermott met with the GM and the owner, and he kind of told them some of the issues he thought the roster had, and the GM and the owner didn't like it. I'm like, what are y'all doing? Like, there were always clear limitations with this roster. The hope was that Josh Allen could just overcome that. And obviously, he couldn't. He couldn't. And he played poorly in this game. It's not like he had an excuse. I know so a lot of people are getting mad at like NFL media people for not being critical of Josh Allen, which I get. Yeah, they should be. Josh Allen did not play his best in this game. Had a lot of turnovers, had some missed throws in key moments. So it wasn't a horrible game for Josh Allen, but it wasn't a good one. And he did hurt the Bills in some key spots. But we'll see what the Bills do at head coach moving forward. It sounds like they may be interested in bringing back Brian Dable. He was their OC years ago. They may hire him to be the head coach. Apparently Josh Allen really likes him. And he seems to be a smart offensive mind. So we'll see how that goes. That could be an interesting hire. But crazy, sequence of events after this game, with Bo Nix's injury being announced and the firing of Sean McDermott being announced, a few days later. That was crazy. But yeah, that game was absolutely insane. It was wild. The refs were committing terrorism in overtime. It was crazy. That's like overblowing it. Now that I've had some time to think about it, the refereeing in that game wasn't actually that bad, but in the moment, I'm like losing my mind. Like, what are we doing? That was clearly a catch for Brandon Cooks. This PI sucks. After I've had some time to think about it, it wasn't that bad. But yeah, fun game, lots of fun. Now let's move on and talk about the Rams-Bears game. This game, man, if you thought Bills-Broncos had a crazy ending, the Rams-Bears ending was absolutely nuts. Like, incredible. Peak cinema football right here. This was a struggle for both teams offensively. I don't think Matthew Stafford or Caleb Williams were, that great in this game. Matthew Stafford really struggled. He really struggled in this game. Like, his numbers were not very good. He was completing less than 50% of his passes, had 6.1 yards per pass attempt, like 0 touchdowns, 4 sacks. Like, it was kind of a rough game for Matthew Stafford. Caleb didn't really play that great, but he also had some big moments. Didn't take a sack. He was really productive running the ball, so like he wasn't horrible, but he had a few. He had like 3 interceptions. Like that's bad. That's rough, but yeah. So weird game for both of these offenses where neither team was really that great offensively. Throwing the ball was kind of tough. You had the weather. It was snowing at one point. It was very cold. So you had that. People were very critical of Sean McVay's game plan in this game. I saw some people saying it was like the worst game he had ever coached, which, wow, that's a bold statement. Like, that's big. So it was kind of cool seeing people, or like kind of crazy seeing people's reaction to this game and the coaching. I did want to talk about the big play Caleb Williams had at the end of the fourth quarter. It was, I'm trying to remember what the situation was for that big throw he made to tie the score at 17-17. I'm going to the play-by-play to look at this because I want to remember. I want to refresh my memory on what the situation was with that play. So we had that touchdown at the end of the fourth quarter. It was 4th and 4 at the Rams' 14-yard line. So the Bears had 14 yards to score a touchdown. Caleb Williams drops back in the pocket and gets pressured pretty quickly. And so he's trying to run outside the pocket, but with the way that the pass rush got to him, he could only run straight back. So he runs back like 30 yards. Literally, it was insane. And then he makes a throw like flat-footed, but also fading away. And he throws the ball on a rope 51 yards in the air to Colston Loveland in the back of the end zone on the left side. Loveland's open. He catches it. Touchdown. Absolutely insane throw. One of the craziest throws I have ever seen in my entire life. It was bonkers. It was like an alien was throwing the football and not a human being. Because I do not understand. I don't think it's possible for me to comprehend how a human being could execute that throw in that situation. It's already cold as heck. You're fading away, flat-footed from, 50 yards out, and you throw the ball on a rope. Like, that's wild. And to be fair, the ball was in the air for a long time. I don't know what the Rams secondary was doing there. There may have been a push-off. I saw some people saying that it was a clear push-off on Loveland. But still, like, for considering the situation, the ball was thrown pretty hard. Like, it had some velo on it. And that was just an insane throw from Caleb. Like, it's the type of throw that makes you say, yeah, like, this guy, he's not perfect. He's not consistent enough. But golly, the highs are high. He's clutch. He's made some huge throws in these playoffs. It was incredible. And then we get to overtime, where things fall apart for the Bears. It all starts out with the interception. So, there was a play in overtime for the Bears where Ben Johnson cooked up an amazing play call. He had a play where it was Romo Dunze running a streak, running a go route, and what that play was meant to do, what that route from Romo Dunze was meant to do, was to clear out the safeties and try to open up DJ Moore on a crossing route. And based on the way that the defense was reacting, DJ Moore was going to get open. And all he had to do was flatten his route a little bit, react to the way the secondary was playing. Flatten his route, that would have given Caleb Williams some room to make a throw, pick up a first down, and put the Bears in a position to score and end the game. Because they could have kicked the field goal at that point, because they already forced a punt from the Rams at the start of overtime. But DJ Moore doesn't try on the route. He's jogging like the whole time. Doesn't give enough effort. Doesn't speed up when the ball is released. And so the defender is able to undercut him and pick off the pass. It was insane. I've never seen anything quite like that. It was absolutely unreal. Moore just continues running where the safety is, doesn't try to create any kind of leverage there. It was insane. Now, was the throw perfect? Maybe not. But honestly, I think the throw was in a spot where if Moore flattens his route, he's either drawing a offensive PI, or sorry, he's either drawing PI, he's either drawing pass interference, or he's making a tough catch and picking up a first down. So the fact that DJ Moore didn't try and put forth a better effort there was ridiculous. And it's the type of play that's going to get him either cut or traded. That's what's going to happen. I don't expect DJ Moore to be on the Bears next season. I think that play is going to be the last straw. But thankfully, Caleb Williams did not throw him under the bus. He was very, he showed a lot of good leadership after the game. He didn't blame DJ Moore for that play. He said there was some miscommunication. But he would not say that DJ Moore did not try and did not put forth enough effort there, which I thought was commendable. After this game, we're going to see the Rams take on the Seahawks in the NFC Championship, which is going to be just chef's kiss, peak cinema. Then we've got Broncos versus the Patriots. That game should be pretty interesting too. But I think the Rams and the Seahawks are the two best teams in the NFL. And man, the Seahawks look freaking good. They look absolutely amazing. They make me feel dumb for not picking them to win the Super Bowl. I picked the Rams. The Seahawks were my second choice. But man, after watching the Seahawks versus the 49ers, I'm thinking, man, I think that might have been a mistake. Because Seattle just looks phenomenal right now. But yeah, those are my thoughts on those two big games from the divisional round. Next up, going to talk about CJ Stroud struggles in the playoffs because, man, he had a rough postseason. All right, it's time to close out the podcast. We're going to talk about CJ Stroud's playoff performance this year and his struggles in this year's postseason. Wow, was that not a rough outing for him this year in the postseason? He really played poorly in the Texans' two playoff games. I talked in a recent video about the Texans' defense. I broke down what makes their defense so good, why their defense is one of the best units in the NFL on that end of the ball, or on that side of the field. And I talked about, me being really high on the Texans this year, thinking they had what it takes to make a run to the AFC title game. But then I thought they may end up, getting bounced out early because I didn't trust their offense. I didn't trust their run game. And honestly, I just didn't trust CJ Stroud enough. And I thought that Stroud could end up holding this team back in the playoffs. Now, I was not expecting Stroud to play as poorly as he did. The numbers speak for themselves. He completed just 51.9% of his passes, had 2 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, lost 2 fumbles, and took 6 sacks across 2 games. That was against the Steelers and the Patriots. And he was absolutely awful against the Patriots. He was so bad in that game that I was expecting him to get benched at one point because he simply was making way too many mistakes. He was so bad against the Patriots that he had one throw that was so inaccurate, it literally tore his tight end's ACL. That play was insane. That's how bad Stroud was in that game. And I'm not trying to be rude. I know I'm just some random dude in my apartment. I get that. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm being real here. I'm being real. Stroud struggled in the playoffs. And the offense suffered because of it. The Texans ranked 12 out of 14 playoff teams in EPA per dropback, which is really bad. And they never scored more than 16 points in either playoff game. That's really bad. And I know a lot of people are really dogging Stroud for his performance in the playoffs, and people are questioning, his stat, where he ranks among NFL quarterbacks. I think it's a really interesting conversation because of how Stroud's career started. When he was a rookie, he played very well. He had a phenomenal rookie season. Like, truly an all-time great rookie campaign. But since then, he has kind of, kind of regressed a little bit and just hasn't really, improved a whole lot. And even after his rookie season, I made a video talking about, what I thought he did well his rookie year and why I actually was lower on him than the consensus. I talked about his accuracy, which I thought was overrated during his rookie season. I think I talked about his deep ball passing in that video. I'm trying to remember. There were a few things that I talked about in that video that I thought were concerns and areas where he needed to improve. And the reason I made that video at the time is because people were talking about Stroud as like potentially a top 5 quarterback after his rookie season. And I just thought that was too much. I was like, okay, let's pump the brakes here. He was amazing for a rookie, but he still has some flaws that need to improve. And I got a lot of flack for that video. People were killing me. They were like, you're an idiot. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. I am an idiot, okay? But I was actually absolutely correct in that video. I was actually cooking. It was crazy. And since then, I think Stroud's like gotten worse. Weirdly. He hasn't been consistent enough post his rookie season. And he's been so bad in the playoffs. Like, he literally almost single-handedly killed the Texans in this year's postseason. I mean, it was actually incredible that the Texans dominated the Steelers. And the reason why they dominated the Steelers is because their defense scored 2 touchdowns. Their defense, which had really been carrying the team the whole year, was phenomenal in the playoffs. It was great. It was probably, the second best defense in the postseason outside of Seattle. But the offense just couldn't come through. And weren't able to throw the ball well enough. Their run game's been horrible all year. But yeah, man, I don't know what to make of CJ Stroud. He's still so young. And I like Stroud. I love him as a person. I have nothing against Stroud personally. All of this is purely football. But man, he's not consistent enough. He's not good enough in all these areas. It's like Trevor Lawrence. I feel similarly about CJ Stroud as I feel about Trevor Lawrence. I do like Lawrence more than Stroud. I think Lawrence is probably better than Stroud, but like Lawrence is a guy that I think has so much talent and has so much raw ability, but is a little bit raw, not consistent enough. And I want to see Stroud become the best he possibly can. I loved him as a prospect coming out of college. I thought he was so good at Ohio State. I loved him. I thought he was well worth the second pick when the Texans picked him. I thought he was so good in college. But honestly, the early part of his career has been a little bit underwhelming at times, if I'm being real. And I don't know what to make of him moving forward. He's got to improve a lot. He's got to improve a ton. I'm waiting for the day when I can say, this dude is that guy. He is a clear top 10 quarterback. And I just don't feel that way right now. I just don't. Now, maybe I'm being overly critical of Stroud. I don't think I am. I think people are just way too protective of Stroud, if I'm being real. I don't think people have talked about his struggles enough over the years. Because I think they've been real. They've been obvious. And people just aren't talking about it for some reason. I think the Texans have a really bright future if Stroud can elevate his play and can reach that next level. Because that defense is special. With Derek Stingley, Will Anderson, you've got Daniel Hunter, you've got Al-Shair Aziz. That dude's a baller. That defense is so freaking good, man. And they're so good in such a weird way. Like, they only rush forward. They don't ever blitz. They run like cover two, cover two man and like cover six. And they don't like ever make any kind of, they don't like disguise their coverage really. They just go out there and play ball and lock you down. And it works for them. So if Stroud can elevate his play and can, lead the Texans to like a top 5 offense, this team has the potential to win it all. It does. The foundation's there. We gotta figure something out with Stroud. We gotta get him to be really accurate, to be really good at avoiding sacks, to be good throwing middle of the field, throwing deep. We gotta get that Ohio State version of CJ Stroud to come out. If we can do that, this team's got the potential to do a lot of great things. But yeah, those are my thoughts on CJ Stroud's playoff struggles this year. I was really discouraged by what I saw from him in the postseason. And I thought, I was concerned about the Texans offense. And I wasn't a CJ Stroud believer, and I thought he may hold them back. And that's what ended up happening. It's really upsetting. It sucks. I like CJ Stroud. I want to see him succeed, but he's got a lot of growing to do. We'll see what he does in the offseason. We'll see how he develops. But he's got to do something. He's got to grow a lot as a player. That's all I've got for today's episode. I hope y'all enjoyed that. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. That would help me out a lot. If you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcast, please leave a review. That would help me out a lot as well. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And I will see y'all next time. God bless.